So we were actually in the mall in Concord Mills, and the kids were shopping. I said, y'all go shop. I'm going to just walk to the bookstore and get a book. And I happened to just pick this up in the mall, and I sat down and I started reading it, and I just did not put it down until I finished it. And so, as I mentioned, when I first went to do first year in seminary, it was an assignment freshman year, and a lot of it I didn't understand. It was hard to read. Maybe it's because I was, thrown into seminary. There was a lot going on, but it just didn't stick. But this second time around, I think because I better understood just the Bible and theology, it made a lot more sense. And so the first chapter is Costly Grace. And he opens with, a bold statement. You talked about being bold. He says, cheap grace is the deadly enemy of our church. We're fighting today for costly grace. So I think the assignment was, what does cheap grace versus costly grace look like for you in your personal life? And so that was something that I had to think about the first year. And I think, I think about costly grace being exactly what it says. It ought to be costly to you. It should cost you something. It costs God something in the form of Jesus to come down and be nailed to a pagan cross. It should cost us something as well, to have that communion and that divine relationship. And so it should be evident through like your practices, whatever they are. There's a list of things you can be doing, but it ought to cost you something in your time and your effort. And so I think that's, to me, what costly grace is, a synopsis of what it would be.
Yeah, man. I think cheap grace has run rampant. And by that, by not having a background, so my viewpoint of cheap grace versus costly grace. Cheap grace is, Jesus paid it all.
Yeah.
Look
at what I wrote down in the book. Jesus paid it all.
Look at that. That's crazy. That's wild. So with Jesus paid it all, that means, any sin credits I run up, it's just, it's a write-off. It's a write-off. He got it. Versus costly grace where, you said it costs you something, it costs you everything.
Yeah.
Because Jesus said, pick up your cross and follow me. Like, it costs you your life.
Yeah.
Because now I'm trying to design my life to walk behind Jesus Christ. So I'm trying to live according to his statutes, which is completely counter to the culture or our natural desires. You see what I'm saying? So, on one hand, you remember Daddy Warbucks, Orphan Annie?
Oh, yeah.
So looking at him as Daddy Warbucks, like, hey, I can do whatever I want and he gonna cover the cost. Nah, you have some direct responsibility in this.
Yeah.
So that's how I view cheap versus costly.
Yeah, for sure. It's fast way out. So it's really 4 principles. Truth is the T: truth, fasting, wisdom, and ownership. The T for truth comes out of John. So John 8. If you follow my teachings, you're really my disciples. Then you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So if you follow in the truth, if you follow the teachings, then you're truly the disciples. So it's only the ones that follow behind and actually do the practices and have the costly grace. Ultimately, is what it is.
Yeah, because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life.
That's right. Yeah,
absolutely.
So I wrote Jesus paid it all as an example of cheap grace.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, we don't have to do anything. Jesus paid it all.
Yeah, so keep running up these sin credits over here.
Run them up.
I like that. Run them up.
The world goes on in the same old way.
Yes. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Check this out. Cheap grace, therefore, amounts to a denial of the living Word of God.
Yeah.
That's a strong one right there.
Yeah. And you still on the first page.
Yeah, we still on the we still on the first page, man.
Yeah.
And he has another one. This heavy. Cheap grace means the justification of the sin without the justification of the sinner.
Yeah. So I remember hearing that, and that's hard to even decipher. So cheap grace is justification of the sin. Costly grace justifies the sinner. So cheap grace will say a little bit of sin is okay, it's cool, no big deal.
Or matter of fact, habitual, because it's about what we habitually do. Because even on the path to follow Jesus, we're gonna fall because you're gonna sin. You know what I mean? Even if you're 99% right, you're 0.1% wrong. You're 1% wrong, whatever. So yeah, man, like it's what you habitually do. It's like, you know, I dabble in XYZ, God's gonna forgive me. Next week, I dabble in XYZ, He's just gonna forgive me. Again, I dabble in XYZ. You see what I'm saying? You continually, habitually going back to the exact same things. Then you ask for forgiveness just so you can go back and do more.
Yeah.
I forgot what verse it is, but it's like, should we continue in sin so that God's grace may abound? And then it's depending on what version you're reading, either says certainly not or surely not, but absolutely not.
That's
you know what I mean? Yeah, just because his grace is the I like this one. It's the gap insurance. Just because his grace is the gap insurance don't mean I need to be driving reckless.
No, you have a responsibility, accountability
Is it
as well. Bonhoeffer jumps into discipleship. So chief grace is grace without discipleship. So
that's absolutely right.
How would you define discipleship? What do you think?
So following Christ, because the disciple is someone who follows Christ. So discipleship is, I would say, the act of following Christ. You know, the act of the routine of following, the practice of following Christ. That might be better.
Is it optional?
Not for a disciple. For a disciple, it's like defining the word without using the word.
Right.
For a disciple, discipleship ain't
It
ain't optional.
optional.
It ain't optional at all. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, can I be hot without being hot? I don't know. Can you? I believe so.
Yeah, I was talking to Gina, I think last week, and we're talking about what do the followers look like? And I'm like, they should look like the original thing, right? The followers should look like the original.
You should look like carbon copies, man.
Right, right. So I don't think it's optional. I think it's a requirement. If you want to get on the side of costly grace, and I know I'm way on that side, discipleship to me is not optional. It's easy. It's
radical obedience, man.
Yeah, radical obedience.
Because he talks about the call to follow. We're not even going to dive into that, but yeah, the call to discipleship. That's the next chapter.
Yeah.
And he talks about, you know, how do you respond when Jesus called you? You know, what happens when you answer to the call? Can you compromise the call? You know, basically, yeah, Jesus, I'm gonna follow you, but I need to, you know, what rich man said, suffer me not. So first off, you know, I want to follow you, but let me do X, Y, let me do this first. So you're trying to compromise the call.
Yeah.
You know, so it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and he even says it's the obligation of discipleship, and costly grace was turned into cheap grace without discipleship. So again, we're still on the first chapter, but the requirement of the actual practicing of the following, which ultimately turns the person, should be a change in the person, confirmation of the character into Christ likeness. It should happen with time, ultimately. Yeah.
There's one other one. This is actually like just the second page, man. Cheap grace is not the kind of forgiveness of sin which frees us from toils of sin. Cheap grace is the grace that we bestow on ourselves. So it's basically it's my view of grace versus God's view of grace.
This is what I think.
Yeah. I know God said this, but this is what he means.
So you get a room with a bunch of people, and it's like, well, I think was like, well, I don't know that it matters all that much what you think.
That's right.
Here's what it says.
That's right. This is what it says.
This is what it says.
Yeah, man. It's a lot of good stuff in here, man.
It does end on a light note, right? So it does, you know, discipleship can be costly, and it should be costly, but it does result in a joyous experience, I think. And so my dad would say, happy are those who work for peace. And so going to the end of chapter 1, he has, happy are the simple followers of Jesus Christ who've been overcome by his grace. And grace simply means discipleship. Happy are those who have become Christians in the sense of the word. So yeah, grace and discipleship. Happy are those who work for peace.
Yeah, man. And there's one other one. It says, you were bought with a price. What has cost God much cannot be cheap for us.
Did it cost God? Yeah, absolutely. It cost him a lot.
Yes.
So you have to ask, it should be costly. So nothing but full obedience, and this goes into that single-minded obedience.
That's right. That's right, man.
So
So what does discipleship look like in 2024?
To me, I think it's practice. I think in one of our episodes we talked about spiritual disciplines, and I think we talked about a lot of different authors, but Dallas Willard is a guy I learned about in the most recent term in seminary, but I think he's the guru from what I've seen on just spiritual discipline. So it's what are the actual practices, and I think it's really up to the person. For me, I've done a lot of the fasting, praying, solitude, silence, meditation I'm getting into, but also scripture reading, praying, worship. To me, I think any of those practices, actually doing them and not talking about them, I think it's what you do in the dark, what you do behind closed doors, is what counts to me. But there's a list of things you can pick from.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Fasting, sowing, prayer, and praise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, you control all four of those. No, don't matter where you're at in life, you control how much you're going to fast. You control how much you're going to sow into the kingdom, whether it's sowing your time, sowing your riches. Prayer, communication with God, you're absolutely in control of that, and praising God. So, praise and worship, you can use those interchangeably. You're in control of all four of those.
Yeah.
And all of those bring you closer to God.
Yeah, definitely. Means of grace. That gets into the Wesleyan theology, but the different means of grace. So you got a list you can pick from, and I think it varies by person. And so your list hopefully should be similar to mine, but I might put more emphasis on fasting than others might put.
Yeah.
But to me, I think it's those actual, there for those who put these words of mine into practice is what makes a difference, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good stuff, man.
So, anybody interested in starting a journey, a fasting journey, we do have some stuff on the website. So if you go to thefastwayout.com, start here. There's a link in the menu. So we got just a couple options. There's an easy, medium, hard. Just anybody interested, thinking about trying to get into.
Absolutely free.
Absolutely free, for sure.
I've shared it, and I throw that absolutely free information.
Yeah.
It's just gonna cost you some discipline.
It's gonna run you.
It's gonna run you. You get to play at your own. You get to choose what level you want to play at.
Yeah.
You want to stick your toe in there. Or you just want to get knee deep.
Yeah. And so if you want to know how I lost 80 pounds at the house in my spare time in a pandemic while I was in school full time,
which is nuts.
Homeschooling the kids.
People gained 80 pounds in that pandemic at home, not lose.
Yeah. So no program, just some old school self-discipline. Yeah. But the website shows you how I did it. So
that's right.
It wasn't a get rich quick. It has taken some time. But that's changes that stick. I think changes that actually are permanent. They take time. So
absolutely, man.
They're on the website if anybody's interested.
It's good stuff. Good stuff. Anything else in closing?
No, just thanks. Like, subscribe.
That's right.
Continue to check us out.
Yep, hit play.
Yep.
If you appreciate it, the best thing you can do is hit play and share this with somebody else who can hit play.
Share it. Go check out the movie.
That's right.
And jump into the deep end of discipleship. We jumped in.
Jump straight in.
We did a somersault.
Dive in. No life vest. Dive on in.
That's right.
But yeah, thanks for tuning in. Again, like, subscribe. Stay tuned. If you haven't seen the old content, go back and check out the old content.
That's right. Great stories.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Peace.
Thanks.